So this little square is where it all started. This is the oldest part of the neighborhood where the first houses were placed. So yeah, where do I even start to begin talking about this neighborhood? Hi guys, good morning. It's been really quiet on this channel lately, and the reason for that, well, there are actually several reasons for that, but one reason is that I started a new project. As I think I mentioned in my first introduction introducing Cherry Blossom Springs, when I got inspired by Cindy from Pleasant Sims, I did two things. One, I really had the urge to start a completely new neighborhood from scratch and completely clean. That is what turned out to be Cherry Blossom Springs. But also, I've been working on getting my old neighborhood, SimsVille, ready to start rotational gameplay. And I've been working on that for quite some time. So for a long time, I couldn't really play this neighborhood, not without the pink flashing, lots of crashes, and it's been really annoying. But a few weeks ago that got fixed, and during my CC overhaul project I kind of archived my save file, and I wasn't really able to put it back. Also because of the crashing and stuff like that, I've never been able to load it on a higher than medium viewing distance. But lately I've gotten a lot of tips to make the game work better, and it has worked so much better for me. So the first time that I loaded up this old neighborhood, I put back the save file, I loaded up the game, I set it on the highest viewing distance, no fading, and oh my god. I mean, everything is old and most of the buildings are really ugly, but there is so much nostalgia here. It was so much fun to see the entire neighborhood from all of the lots. It nearly made me cry. It was so much fun to see something that you've never seen before. Like, I've played those neighborhoods and those houses for years and years, and the only thing you could see is like the next door neighbor, or maybe one building further than that, but that was the maximum. And the image it gives from every household to just be able to see the entire neighborhood, it's so much more immersive, and seeing that, it really adds to the idea of an integrated neighborhood. It makes so much more sense that you would like walk to the bakery at the next corner, or that the elementary school is just a few blocks away and the parents are driving their kids to that school, stuff like that. It has made me reconsider all of the older ideas that I had for like building community lots that would represent the career paths. And of course I didn't know about integrated neighborhoods back then, but I had all of these ideas what I wanted. They're specific, like the criminals. There are lots of criminals in my neighborhood, and I thought it would really be nice to let them have some kind of warehouse where they would hang out and stuff like that. So now that I know all these new things about integrated neighborhoods and have seen other simmers make some amazing community lots, I really have some brand new ideas how to add them to this neighborhood. That's what we're going to do in this next series, but we're mainly going to focus on the stories of these Sims, the stories of these families, because this neighborhood, it's not clean, it's not empty. It has a long history going back to the first generation, where I started these 4 families with a backstory and a sort of starting point in mind, which I will tell you all about later on in this video. And I feel even more inspired and like almost like a fever to start telling these stories of these 4 families. Also, I think I should mention, I am not planning on abandoning Cherry Blossom Springs. I still love that custom neighborhood, but these 4 families and these stories, they've been in my head since I've started this channel, and at this point it really feels like it needs to come out now. So we are going to go back to Cherry Blossom Springs at some point in time, I promise you that. But for now, we are going to dive deep into this old neighborhood and start telling these stories and start the renovations. And I will tell you all about the renovations in another introduction video, because I want to do a separate series about those renovations. Because another thing that I noticed when I stepped into these households and took a good look around the neighborhood with the eyes from today instead of the eyes from the past who have created this hood, None of the buildings match. It looks like every building has been thrown in here randomly, and that is because that is exactly what happened. I've made several kind of districts and they couldn't see each other, but now that you can, there are so many different styles and stuff, and of course I can't build, so I downloaded most of the buildings. As a general rule, when you see a building you like, I didn't build it, I downloaded it. The ugly things, the squares and the weird roofs and stuff, those are mine, and that is something that I actually want to take on in another separate series. I want to do renovations around this town. We're going to start with the oldest houses, but we're going to do the entire town lot by lot, and especially the oldest houses. I don't want them to be like completely modern. I want them to have that old Maxis feeling, and yeah, they don't have to be perfect, and they especially still have to be in the style of those oldest families. But I do want to remake them because right now they are really ugly and they can really use a renovation. So we're going to start a separate series for that in a separate playlist. So if you're interested in doing renovations, go and check out that playlist. But in this series, we're going to focus on the stories, and to be able to get a start with those stories, I had to line up different ages because once upon a time, when I started this neighborhood, I did play rotationally. I played the 4 families first until all the children were toddlers, then until all the children were children, then until all the children were teenagers, and on and on. And I did that until the 3rd generation, but it all went sideways from there. So mainly my favorite families are a lot younger than my lesser favorite families, and I used the elixir of life a lot, and I jumped around through all the families, playing one household more than the other. So for some families, the children that should be the same age as the ones that are graduating right now, they still had to be born. So I did some reconstructive work, and meaning I played the game. And it was a lot of fun, of course. Of course, I've had the SimsVille fever since then, and I haven't been able to put it down. So, guys, we're going to do a new series, and again, I'm so excited about this. I've been wanting to do this for almost a year, and there was so much work to get it ready to the point where it is now. And so at this point, there are over 100 households in this neighborhood, spread out around the main hood and its 3 subhoods. So let's take some time in this introduction to walk you through some of the history of this neighborhood, because it is full. Of course, we are not going to play all of the 100 households in this series. We are going to make a selection of maybe 32 and consider the rest of them townies. I think that would work. And I will upload separate videos introducing in much more detail the main families that play the major roles. So in order to do that, we need to go back in time almost 20 years to where I first started playing The Sims 2 when it just got released. I had been playing The Sims 1 for many years, and I really loved that game, and it was always a bit limiting that children could never grow past this child stage. So when I heard about The Sims 2 and when I heard about the DNA and children growing up and having families and children of their own, I was completely obsessed with that idea. And it's just the whole idea of seeing the children grow up into adults, having families of their own, how the genetic system would make them look through the generations, and seeing their grandparents' features in children of later generations, and how all of that would influence their characters. That was like so exciting to me. And thinking back, I can really still feel that excitement of wondering, what would their babies look like and how is this going to develop? And yeah, that was always a really interesting aspect of the game, even before it came out, and I was just reading about the new Sims 2 that was going to be released soon. So with those thoughts in mind, I had already created sort of a plan for when the game would be released, and I'm sure I messed around a little bit in the tutorial and I had a good look around Pleasant View, but almost immediately I created those 4 families that I had designed in my head. I really have been playing them ever since. I really created them with the idea to play them for generations. I don't think I knew back then that 18 years later I would still be playing them though. And one thing I know for certain that I didn't know was that almost 20 years later I would be making a video about them. Because probably YouTube didn't exist back then. Yeah, so I'm old. Um, So yeah, that was never really the intention. But for some reason I did always make videos and I always took pictures because for some reason I always wanted to document their stories. Mainly for having those stories for myself. But at this point it means that for this channel and for you to watch, I actually have over 15 years of footage of these Sims and of these stories. So of course we are going to use them and we're going to have flashbacks and dive into their history whenever we can and whenever it adds something to their story at this point in time. So let's go and take a look where we are today. So this little square is where it all started. This is the oldest part of the neighborhood where the first houses were placed and where the first 4 families raised their children. So before we get into the history and the family tree, let's see who lives there now. And I'll walk you through the origins of this neighborhood and how it all got started. So there are 4 families that are each very different from one another. We have the Dawsons, the Margolis family, the Hamiltons and the Tuckers. And those 4 families are even into the 4th generation, like almost like 4 completely separate neighborhoods. They have their own groups of friends, their own circle that they really interact with. And I kept them mostly separate, even though there are friendships and some partners between them. Mostly for OCD reasons, really, to be able to manage and organize this neighborhood, because like I said, there are at this point around 350 Sims that are alive, walking around, and it all became quite unmanageable. But I will tell you how I did that through the generations. So let's start with the first generation. These 4 houses is where the 4 families started their lives. So the Dawsons started here, the Margolis family started here, the Hamiltons here, and the Tuckers here. Like I said, these houses are they're not the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But we're gonna work well. We're going to do something about that later. They are empty for now. I might move in some new families that are in the bin right now and that I've been working on. This was basically the setup. So we had 4 families with 2 children. So the parents lived here and the children were going to live here. And the 3rd and 4th generation are just spread out across all the subhoods and the rest of this ginormous map. So yeah, we have the Dawsons. You might see someone familiar in here. We have Comey Tellerman and Sandy Brody, really, Sandy Tellerman. There is a reason why they are living here, and that is part of the story of this household, so we're not going to get into that right now. They are really at the end of their lives and will not be here for very long. So we will probably just see them in one episode, and that will be the end of their lives, or they will move to the retirement home. So we have Comey Tellerman, who is a towering tycoon for some reason. He's really not that rich, but I guess he was successful, sort of. We have Sandy, who is a fiery fossil, and I just so love that for her. Then we have Ellie Vaughn, Savant Supreme, and Harold Vaughn, who is the same, and their daughter, Everly Vaughn. These descriptions are like so accurate for who they really are. Of course, we're going to get into their backstories in the coming episode. I just wanted to do a quick overview of these 8 houses right now. Then we have the Margolis family, Sven Margolis, and who is a town father and a town mother, Helga Margolis, and that is again so accurate. They're really, I would say, the warm hearts of the family, the neighborhood, really. They have a huge family. I will show you the family tree later on. They were, I guess, all of the 2nd generation were my favorites, but these in particular I really liked, which was the cause of them having way too many children, and that's actually where it went kind of. Well, I wouldn't say wrong, because I still love this neighborhood very, very much, and I love that they had so many children, but it became complicated. Then we have Helena Margolis, a real somebody. She's not really anybody right now. She hasn't been that lucky in life, and she moved back in with her parents. Her son is in college, and he will be graduating soon, so we will be seeing his return in their first episode. Then we have the Hamiltons, who were the richest family in town and all about politics, and they were not necessarily really not nice people. They were just really focused on success. So we have Robert Hamilton, who's a fat cat, and Jackie Hamilton, who's also a town mother. Eric Hamilton, one of their sons, a free thinker, which I again really love for him. He is about to become a judge. And then we have Brianna Hamilton, his wife, and a family rock. She is one of the university NPCs, one of the dormies that Eric fell in love with when he went to college. They actually got into a relationship at a really, really young age, so she moved back in with him and his parents. And then we have the Tuckers. She is Monique. I'm sorry, her name, Monique. She is a town mother. Again, this might be one of the less accurate descriptions in her case. She had a rough start in life and she might have become more successful later on. Yeah, I'd rather see this a little lower, but of course I'm not going to have the second generation being any less than platinum when they die. Jim Tucker, who is a town father, they were both family Sims, which again resulted in many, many babies. Then we have Sabrina Bailey, because she married Zeb Bailey. The thing is, my neighborhood wasn't in English when I started it, so I recently renamed a SimPE file with over 1,000 names all to English. So yeah, I might have made some mistakes in that, and I will fix that before we start. So we have Sabrina, who's married to Zeb. He's an NPC, but I'm not. He's one of the townies or the downtownies, but I'm not sure of which expansion pack he is. And their daughter Kira. She is actually the 4th generation too. She is She was born really late in Sabrina's life, so her life stage is not really where we wanted to be when we start the episode. She's probably going to be in college back then. She is a wonder girl, and I love that for her. And moving on to the second row, so the second child of the 2nd generation. So here are the parents. This is where the first child lived, and this is where the second child moved into when they became adults and got married and started their own families. So we have the Graham Dawson family. That is because the Grahams are going to move in here and take over this house. We have Iris Dawson, a senior socialite, and that is again so accurate because she really has the most connections and friendships in that generation, and she just kept in contact with everyone and cared about everyone around. And we have Bob Dawson, the town father. He is a police chief, and we will be seeing a lot of him in the first few episodes. In one of the first few episodes, he doesn't have that many friends, but he is really kind of a solid rock that you can just count on. And yeah, again, we will be going into depth into these characters later on in the next episodes. And we have the Campbells. She is the daughter of the 1st generation Margolis, but Benjamin was called Campbell, so we changed their name. And actually 2 of their children are living at home right now. So we've got Miriam and Benjamin. Miriam is a satisfied Silvermane. I kind of like that too. It's just fitting for her for some reason. And Benjamin, the Silver Fox, couldn't be better. He has had some romances, mainly with the maids and just some random townies that were walking by. He is older now, and they are still married. Miriam. We're going to get into that in their episode. I just can't help but wanting to tell what happened. Okay, so we've got Chris Campbell, a primo pleasure seeker, and Sophia, who is probably the same. Yes, they are twins. They are pleasure sims, and yeah, they just graduated and started their families. Chris married Jenna, and Sophia married Jackson, who is, I think, one of the Pleasant View townies. Jackson Lewis. He might be called Carr. I forget his first name. I will try and look that up. A Mullah Mogul. He is. I might change his aspiration later on. Jenna is a femme fatale, but again, pretty accurate. Calvin and Lucas, their respective sons. Then we have the Mulhollands. They are, of course, connected to the Hamiltons. Jane was their daughter, who married Rudy Mulholland, who's a senior sage. I kind of like that. And she is a fat cat. I do know that she has the fortune aspiration, but I've always seen her as much more of a combination between fortune and knowledge. She's just really, really serious, and she's been the mayor for a very long time. And then we have the thing in this household is they have one son, and they already started like a legacy home, their family home. I really liked that home. I didn't want to move him back in with his parents, so I looked for a family that was fitting to take over this house. That was the Millers. So we have Goof Miller. That was actually his name when he was generated. I've gotten used to it. So we had Goopy, who was called Goofy in my game, and we had a Goofy and a Goof, and it sounds kind of silly now, but I've gotten used to those names. I renamed Goopy Gil Scarbo to Goopy, but I kept this guy's name. And he's married to Wendy Miller, and they have one son, Dimitri Miller. They are all fortune sims, I think. Yeah, so it's kind of fitting in this household. Dimitri is going to run a bank, so they have lots of funds to start with, and all generated within this community, within this town. And Rose Miller, a lusty lover, his wife or wife-to-be. So these two will probably take over this home. These two are at the end of their lives, and these two are about to retire. So these two are the ones that we're going to see when we start playing this household. And then we have the Ray family. They have a long history. So we have Francine Tucker and Victor Tucker. Again, Victor Tucker, Silver Fox, very fitting, is the son of the first generation Tuckers, and he moved in here with his wife Francine, who is a senior socialite. And they had 2 children, and their oldest daughter has had several marriages, and this is actually one of her ex-husbands who moved in with their children's grandparents. So I changed the household name to Ray because he is called Michel Ray. An impressive intellect. Yeah, that is definitely not fitting. He should be knowledge in the red, or either some kind of a mildly successful pleasure sim. He's a dancer, and he's not very good at it. He keeps losing jobs and stuff, but he has 2 children who he is really, really proud of. He has Luke Ray, Maya Ray, a fresh-faced fun lover, and a fresh-faced fun lover. So these 2 are again the 4th generation, and they're having their graduation party in the first episode, or having just had that and starting their lives. They're probably going to live in apartments after they graduate, and we will have to see who is going to live in this house. I haven't really figured that out yet. So yeah, those are the 8 homes that we are going to start with. Because the first 4 episodes of this new series are going to be dedicated to each one of the first 4 families. So we are going to have an in-depth description and introduction to the Dawson family, to the Hamiltons, to the Margolises, and to the Tucker family. So to sort of reference where we are on the timeline, the families you see here are the original families that I created in Create a Sim. So these toddlers were not born in game, they were created in Create a Sim. And these toddlers are the elders that you just saw living in these 2nd generation homes. And the households that we are going to play in the actual episodes following after the introductions are the grandchildren of these toddlers that are just graduated and starting their lives. So the 4th generation at the point where they just graduated from college and are going to start their own lives and have their own children. But before we jump into that, we are going to take a look at how they all started out. So what exactly were their differences and what their family dynamics were. And then we are going to take a quick look at the family trees before we start the actual introductions in the next episode. So when I first loaded up the game, I might have played a day or 2 in Pleasant View, Strangetown and Veronaville just to take a look around, but my own custom neighborhood just kinda had me hooked from the start. The Sims were just so much more alive for me personally, because I created them with a vivid image of their characters and family dynamics in mind. And I kinda gave them all different starting points in life. They did all start out with a standard 20k at the start of the game. The difference just existed in the careers that they had and whether or not they did well in those careers. So one family was rich, another one was poor. One had very loving parents, another very distant parents who got divorced before their children even grew up. One family was really focused on academic achievements, another one on improving the community and making the community a better place. One family was warm and really family oriented, creating really lovely family scenes and stuff. Another family was more money driven and striving for status and success, obviously creating a more distant relationship with their children, or at least a more strict relationship with their children. So there might have been some stereotypes in there to set up the stage at the starting point of those first generations, and to really see how that would influence later generations in their life choices and life opportunities. So yeah, that really created the stage. And of course, the second generation experienced both failures and successes in all of those fields that I just mentioned. Really creating a further diversifying set of starting points for the third generation. And that is, in my opinion, where it got more and more interesting, and also where I got kind of really addicted to The Sims 2. Because those families, I've played them for so much time. So as the stereotypes faded and the characters developed more and more into really interesting people, with contradictions, deep background stories, and already having a history, even playing them from the point of where they were born into seeing them grow up into toddlers, that was so addictive. And then having them as adults, that really created households that were so much fun to play that I used the Elixir of Life way more than I care to admit, so they've been around for a long time. So let's take a look at how something so simple in essence expanded to something as huge and complicated as the neighborhood is at this point. Because when I say over 350 Sims, I mean 350 playable Sims, not even counting the townies and the NPCs. I do still keep track of all of it, and starting from the third generation, I had to have kind of a system for that. The first generation was really simple. As you might have seen in the picture so far, I created 4 sets of DNA. All of the hair and skin colors available in the base game were in there. We had 4 houses, and the way I played it is really close to the rotational gameplay that is now known. Pretty much everyone knew each other and the townies that walked by. Some were friends, some not as much, but they were all connected. So then in the second generation, as all of the 8 toddlers at the beginning grew up into adults, I created 8 partners for those 8 Sims without a family, so we had 12 houses in total. And again, pretty much everyone knew each other. Some were friends, some not as much, but still most of them were acquainted, and some were closer than others. Still all based on the Sims' common interests and whether or not they spent time together, really. By the time we got to the third generation, these 8 households combined had 26 children. And again, I had made 26 partners for all of them, this time with a family and some connections between them. But then the university expansion came out and I sent all of those 26 Sims plus their intended 26 partners to college. Completely not taking into account the new attraction system that was introduced in the nightlife expansion, and how much fun it would be to see who they would be attracted to autonomously and how those scenarios would play out. You can kinda guess how that went. Almost all of them were attracted to other Sims than their intended partners. To make it even worse, I knew that all of these children had to find partners in the future. So at this point, I'm thinking ahead for the 4th generation babies who are not even born yet, that in the future, they are going to need partners. And I didn't want to marry them across the other 3 families. So what I did was I started pairing other dormies that the Sims were friends with together so that they would have children that their children could marry. This all led to the 4th generation having an overwhelming amount of 120 children. So yeah, to keep me from going insane, this is also the reason why in this neighborhood you will often see 2 or more families living together, or 3 generations living in the same household. And I have to say that does have some kind of charm in itself. So by that time I started pairing them by groups of 8 friends who all had the same hobby. And even though that did keep me from going insane and made things manageable again, and even added a nice new way of playing the game, because they all sort of made group memories together, which is kind of realistic too if you look at it. If I look at my own teenage years and how I hung around with the same people all the time. But it does take away from the individuality and the randomness that makes The Sims 2 such an awesome game, and that I initially loved so much about it. So at this point, I really want to go back to that again. Without losing track of how we can manage that the Sims don't marry any relatives or have all the family trees intertwined within 2 generations, I really want to go back to that way of playing where we can look at them more like individuals, having a group of friends, but one that is more randomly generated instead of forced upon them. And a really cool way of doing that is using the schools. Is using the integrated schools and sending Sims from around the same age to the same school and to the same class. So that was really a turning point for me and how I played this neighborhood before there were schools. There were really no meeting points for all of these teenagers. All of this 4th generation would have looked so different if there had been schools where they would meet each other. Instead, I had to, without a sim blender, make sure that the Sims that were supposed to marry each other actually met each other, either through their parents or through common friends, and yeah, that was all such a hassle. Honestly, right now I can't even imagine that I ever played without a sim blender. Knowing all the things that you can do with that and all the things that you can do with the mods that I'm using right now, I really cannot imagine that I ever played without it. Of course, I have the experience of how much fun it is to have a playstyle like Cherry Blossom Springs, and even though this neighborhood is much, much bigger, we have, I think, over 300 Sims living, walking, breathing, and interacting with each other. So we are not going to do a festival. At least we're not going to invite all of the Sims. But we are on the verge of a new way of playing this neighborhood, and we're going to do that together on this channel. It's not really going to be rotational gameplay, even though I am planning on keeping up with the rounds and having them all in sync and keeping an Excel sheet and stuff like that. But I really love the playstyle where I jump around between households and kind of tie the stories together and see how they interact with each other and how they influence each other's lives. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep them all in sync. We're going to play them all an equal amount of time, but it's not going to be like a linear storytelling. I'm going to jump around, as you might have been used to if you watched my other series. So we are now at the point where the 4th generation has just graduated or is about to graduate, and the first babies of the 5th generation are being born. So there are actually a few babies that are already in my game because I did that a long time ago. And the rest of them we're going to probably see being born together, which is something that I'm really looking forward to. As you heard my rambling at the beginning of this video, seeing the genetics being passed through generations is still something that is really, really interesting to me. What we are going to do, we are going to step into these 4th generation households one by one. But first, in order to do that, we need to go back into the history of those families. So for the first few videos in this series, they are all going to be about introducing the families to you in hopefully a way that you get to know them in a way that I've known them these last 17 years. 18 years, really. But before we end this video and move on to the next episode, there is one more thing that I want to do together. And that is click through the 4 family trees and show you at least a few highlights of every family. So sit back, relax just a little bit longer, and yeah, tell me, what do you think of this idea so far? Do you like the idea for the new series? Are you going to miss Cherry Blossom Springs for now? Do you prefer continuing that series? Do you prefer the renovations or really the story-based series? Let me know. Just really curious to know what kind of videos you prefer. So yeah, let's move over to the family trees. Here we see the Dawson family tree. This family tree, they all started out with the skin one and red hair. Okay, here we can see that it all started with George and Mary Dawson. They had 2 children, Edwin and Iris. Edwin is not alive anymore, but Iris is. Edwin's daughter Daphne also died at a younger age, and then we have Alexander Dawson and his son Seth Dawson. Daphne had one child, Harold Vaughn, who we saw in Edwin's old house. Edwin was married to Marjorie, and something went wrong with her profile picture. I think her ghost is still wandering around somewhere, and she has like different default clothing because that is not her hair. That is not how she died. She did not die with this hairstyle and this clothing. So I guess she had a makeover in her afterlife. So yeah, back to Iris. Iris had one son, one daughter, and there was some trouble with having a redhead. This family tree is actually the reason why I try to pair redheads with redheads and blondes with blondes and so on, because this guy only had girls. She married a blonde guy, and you can't really see it right here, but Maurice is actually blonde. This is just a custom hairstyle. And then on the other side, he did have sons, but as you can see, this guy is blonde, and he was really supposed to have red hair, but this guy just fell in love with some black-haired woman, and I couldn't break them up, so now Seth has black hair. So yeah, the redheads are really kind of dying out in this neighborhood, and I really don't like that. They are both going to marry a blonde guy. I think the guy she's dating has brown hair, and this one too. So these guys might be the last of the redheads, and we're going to definitely do something about that. I think I'm going to fiddle around in SimPE to actually give this guy red hair, because he did marry a woman with red hair. Okay, so back to the family tree. This is the Dawson family tree, and looking at their first 3 generations, they had 2 children. As all of the second generation, it's 2 children. In total, the third generation were 4 kids. Now about the Dawsons. They are introverted knowledge seekers. Although George decided to be a stay-at-home dad and was somewhat family-oriented, he too approached almost everything in life in a rational manner. You can say that their main focus in life was science, and for example, he would read books about how to be a good parent and doing things just right and just by the book. Their motto could have been better safe than sorry, and the main thing that made them stand out was their intelligence. But you could also say they were a bit overly careful, pessimistic even, and worrying about things that could go wrong. They were convinced that in order to get ahead, you had to work really hard, be humble, and good things just don't happen overnight. They themselves wouldn't even believe that their situation could change for the better, which resulted in much bolder and louder people would get promoted before Marie did. So she brought home a salary that could barely provide for their family, and even at the end of her life, they got by on a teacher's salary. They could probably be best described as just really sober, humble, and not asking for much, really believing that you had to work hard to gain anything in life. Nothing is for free, and everything has to be earned. I didn't incorporate any religion in this neighborhood, but if I did, this family would certainly be very religious. They made all of their decisions based on high moral values, and they raised their children with all of these beliefs and their high moral values. So work hard, stay humble, be rational, and don't be influenced by people living their lives otherwise. All of this combined made the Dawsons a really family-oriented and organized family. So did all of these moral decisions give them the results that they were looking for in life? And did their children become the stable and responsible adults that they were trying to raise? That is what we're going to find out in the episode coming next about the Dawson family, when we are going to look at them all individually and how their lives turned out up until the 4th generation. So in that episode we're going to look at the 1st, 2nd and 3rd generation of these Sims, as a look into their family history before we start the real episodes starting from the 4th generation. Then on to the Hamilton family tree. This is still a very uncluttered and clean family tree. These guys started out with skin 2, blonde hair, and I used a really simple traditional system where the male children carry on the family name for the most part. So those firstborn boys were always like the head of the next generation. And I started doing different things in later generations, but that is how it was at the beginning. So as you can see, just like with the Dawsons, the Hamiltons have 4 kids in the 3rd generation. 3 from the male toddler and 1 from the female toddler at the beginning. Robert Hamilton is still married to Jackie Hamilton, and Jane was married to Rudy. And we just saw those 2 in their house on the 3rd row. Everett James was married to Agatha. They are both not alive anymore, so the 2nd generation are the oldest Sims alive, and even these guys are really close to the end of their lives. When we take a look at the 4th generation, you can see that there are a few more children, and there might be some familiar faces right here. These guys are the exact same children as the one in the Dawsons. That is because he married Willow Dawson. I really tried to avoid not having Sims from the original 4 families marry each other, but these guys, even without ACR and even without any meddling from me, they were just inseparable. They kept finding each other and they kept flirting with each other, so I really couldn't keep them apart. Also, it was so cute to see them together and to see them autonomously do those things. Like I said, even without ACR, without me meddling, they just got in a relationship, and it kind of broke my heart to to keep them apart, even though I really wanted to. So that's why I made the decision to, in the 3rd generation, against all of my plans, ideas and control freak nature, I decided to let them go ahead with all of their romantic actions towards each other that I had tried to stop and cancel until that point. So they got married, had 3 kids, and that is Maurice, Emily and Muriel. And on this side of the family tree, we can see Roy Hamilton, and he is the mayor of this town, and his aunt Jane was the mayor before him for a very long time. He has 4 sons, and this is Daniel Hamilton, and this is Jonathan Hamilton. So if you watch my other series, Cherry Blossom Springs, you might know these guys. These guys will not play a role in this series. They moved to Cherry Blossom Springs, so we will not be seeing them. So moving forward in these stories, we will only see these 6 other 4th generation households. And of course I did that because I'm not sure if you can see that in this screenshot, but the 1st, 3rd and 4th son were all copies of each other, caused by the firstborn syndrome, of course. Yeah, once I saw that, I just didn't want to play on with those guys. The 2nd son is Matthew, is actually very different from Walker, the oldest son, and I really like those 2. They're really close friends, and these 2 were just kind of cut out of this series and moved to Cherry Blossom Springs, and we will be seeing their stories there. So we will not be seeing their children, if they have any. We will not be seeing them in this family tree. So yeah, the Hamiltons. They are ambitious people with a good heart, wanting to play a big role in the community, striving for status and success, but never at the cost of their relationships. They know that you need other people to achieve anything in life, and they know how to get things. They know how to get their way. You can say that their main focus in life was politics and networking, and you could even say that they were very opportunistic, but never cold-hearted. Their motto could have been go for it, never hold back. And the main thing that made them stand out in the neighborhood early on was their ability to start making money quickly. They gathered a small fortune in the first few years of living in this neighborhood. They climbed the ladders in their careers very quickly, making friends and valuable connections all around town and in all the right places. Their focus was never to form deep and meaningful relationships, but always focused on what the relationship could bring them in terms of opportunities and connections. They would have been seen as cold if Agatha didn't truly enjoy spending time with all of these people, and they would have been shallow if Everett James didn't truly believe in making this town a better place for everyone. And in his eyes, sacrificing most of his life to accomplish that goal for the entire community was the best and only way he knew to live his life. They held their children up to their own high standards, and in order for all of that to work, weaknesses cannot be shown to the outside world and have to be dealt with indoors. They made all of their decisions based on high financial values, in a way that money is power and power is the means to be able to do good for the greater good. And the other families didn't always necessarily understand that. They just lived their lives and were kind of oblivious to the deeper intentions, I guess, that the Hamiltons had. All of these things combined made the Hamilton family, who are, by the way, in no way connected to the Hamilton Sims in the base game, they made them a really career-oriented and successful family who got rich early on. So did this privilege of being raised in a rich household make their kids as community and career-oriented as they were? And did their children share their beliefs about money being the means to an end, only to the good for others? If you want to see more of how these individual lives turned out up until the 4th generation, check out the episode about the Hamilton family further down in the playlist. So on to the Tuckers. We have Fred Tucker and his wife Mona. Stefanoff because, they got divorced, she got remarried. It's a long story. And their children, Victor and Monique. Moving over to Fred, we see that he actually had a daughter with his mistress. Looking at the last name, you can probably guess who that was. She was a Pleasant View townie who walked around in this neighborhood. Actually, all of the Pleasant View townies walked around in this neighborhood at some point in time. They did all have very different faiths. So we'll get into that later. So we've got Liliana, and so that means that the 3rd generation consists of 8 children. Considering that the youngest daughter of Monique's is around the same age as Liliana. This one is actually Christoph's mother from, again, Cherry Blossom Springs. Christoph moved to Cherry Blossom Springs. Again, not too complicated, but if we look at the family tree from Monique's point of view, you can see that there are more and more children in the 4th generation, and I really like them all very, very much, and they are probably all going to play a role in this series. So again, we have a lot of households to keep track of, but we'll get to them later. In the first introductions, we are just going to focus on the 1st, 2nd and 3rd generation and just introduce all these characters and their stories. We're going to ease into the 4th generation very, very slowly. So yeah, those are the Tuckers. They started out with skin 3, brown hair. So yeah, about the Tuckers, like I said, Fred and Mona got divorced. Their children had a really, really rough start in life. That was not the Sims who did that. That was actually the intention of this family. I wanted there to be a family who had a really rough start in life and who didn't have loving parents. Fred was mainly, he filled his days with having drinks, just having fun, just spending time with anyone that wasn't his wife, really. He spent a lot of time drinking, socializing, partying, stuff like that. If you can call it partying, with the Sims 2 base game, where they basically only had their own houses and a bar to drink from. So yeah, Mona was really money driven. She didn't even really care that he was occupied with all of these other women. There was one woman in particular, which was Marissa Bendet, and that is who he eventually got caught with by his wife. She was appalled when she really did see him with another woman. At some level, I think she always knew that he wasn't really faithful to her, but as long as she didn't see it, she could just pretend like it wasn't there and just go around her own business, working, making money, and finding her fulfillment in life in other places than her family home. She was never really a mother to stay at home with her kids, and even when she was at home, she was still working and not really paying that much attention to her children. So they really did have a rough start in life, and it shines through in their own lives. So Monique got pregnant at a really, really young age. She fell in love with the gas station attendant around the corner and never went to college. Neither did Victor. Of course, the university expansion pack wasn't there yet, but even in their character and in their storylines, I would have never sent them to college. Their stories just didn't really have room for that. So moving back to the first 2 generations before I continue telling the story that is supposed to be in the next episode. In short, the Tuckers had a sort of you only live once mentality. Either striving for fun, fortune, or fame in their own ways, never really thinking about the consequences. Other people often looked at them with admiration because they lived interesting lives. But all of that certainly came at a cost that mostly later generations had to pay, and not so much the first generation. They did their thing and they were happy in their own ways. Out of all the families, they were certainly the ones with the least consciousness and self-reflection. They acted on their instincts, and most mostly primitive needs. Being extroverts and giving in to their impulses, it often made them stand out in the neighborhood. Depending on who you would ask, they would either be considered really cool or just downright foolish. These people could really never be accused of being normal or boring or blending in with the crowd. They stood out, period. Either in a positive or a negative way, but that all depended on who you would ask. Honestly, Mona was so caught up in her work. She was really a textbook workaholic that she never had any attention for her kids. They did resent her for that later on in life, but by that time they were too busy with their own families and troubles to give that too much thought. This family really didn't have any values. I think it is more the lack of values that really characterizes them. All of these things combined made them a really survival-oriented and really a sort of dysfunctional family to begin with. In the episode about the Tucker family, we're going to see if this was passed down to the next generation. We are going into depth with all the stuff that I started off to talk about just now and how it will influence their children and their grandchildren. To me, this has always been the most interesting family dynamic to play around with, and I really hope that at least some of that will come across in these videos and that it is as enjoyable to watch as it was for me to play these third generation kids in specific. And again, we'll go into all of the details of the individual stories of these first 3 generations in the video that is specifically about introducing the Tucker family to you. So last and certainly not least, especially not in numbers, we have the Margolis family. We started out with David and Lisa Margolis, David and Lisa. They had 2 children, Sven and Miriam. And together they had 11 children. Because, like I said, this family, they were just so warm and loving, and I really liked playing that household. So they had baby after baby after baby after baby. I don't think there are any twins in there. They just had 7 children, and at that point she had the wish to have 10 children, of course, and I kind of put a stop to it there because that it would have gotten out of hand. Marion had 4 children. There's actually twins in there. So after the first 2, I thought, okay, maybe one more, and those became twins, and I didn't have a sim blender or anything back then to stop that, so she had 4 children, 11 together. So this is by far the largest family, and that is why in the 4th generation, I tried to let them have only 1 kid each. I failed, and some of these guys are just too much fun to play and progress their stories with. Elsa, for example, she had kids with 2 different men, which really fit her character and fit her story. And but the first one being a boy, Isaac, and then the second one twins again, so that's why she has 3 children. Rachel was always supposed to have like a larger family, so she has 3 children. That's actually kind of planned. So together they have again 11 children, and that is only on Sven's side. So then we have Miriam's side, and that is where I really plan on sticking to these numbers. They all have 1 kid each. Most of them are boys carrying on the family name, and then I really like that. Again, up until this point, I really tried to pair the redheads with the redheads, the skin fours with the skin fours, the blonde people with the blonde people, and the blonde sims with the blonde sims, and on and on. It's just that the skin 3 and the brown haired, they have the most variety with other partners, I think. I'm not sure why. Sometimes it's just they have ones and they meet a sim that would really fit them, and I don't stick to the plan that I have. But I do plan on, from the 4th generation going on, playing once based. So that means they can marry whoever they want. And I will have to try and keep track of it and manage it in a different way. Being in the 4th generation, having 100 households, it'll take me quite some time to even go through one round. So I'm not too worried about the 6th generation anymore. But yeah, that was always really the main reason. So all these sims, and that's why we have so many households, all these sims in the 3rd generation, I had already made most of the partners for them to get married with, and they all had a little bit of a family, like a mother or a sister or something like that, and a backstory, and I had already played them through their teenage years. And then the university expansion pack came out, and I sent all of these guys to college. And of course, they met completely different Sims, fell in love, the attraction system kicked in. And basically at that point, I kind of doubled my households because I couldn't stop playing the old ones that I had created for them to be partners for these guys. And of course, I didn't want to wreck their wants and send them in a completely different way than who they were attracted to. And it was really cool to see them made Sims fall in love all on their own, and how that all worked, and the randomness of that I really liked. So I basically doubled the households in the 3rd generation, and that is why we have so many right now. So they started out with skin 4, black hair, and I think they stayed that way mostly through the 3rd generation and into the 4th. We are going to let them get married to whoever they want in the 4th generation. These guys will probably all be in college when we start their episodes. And we are, of course, going to start with the oldest son of the first of the guys' line, which is in this case going to David, Sven, Michael, and Joshua. So we're going to start out with Joshua's household. And by the time that we get there, and by the time that he has his first toddler, these guys will definitely be in college and about to graduate. So this is where the age syncing got really messed up. And I've been fixing that over the last few weeks, so we're almost there, and we're going to definitely play out their stories too. So since there are so many, I am not sure how I'm going to organize their households. These guys may share apartments or something and I may send them downtown. Maybe some of them will consider like playable townies or something. I'm definitely not going to turn this into 11 households and then play all 11 separately. I think that will be way too many. So yeah, we'll just skip through the stories or wherever I think the most interesting point of view is, and we'll go from there. So about the Margolis family, they are all just really warm, loving, caring people. Soft and compassionate, but never naive or pushovers. They stand their ground and are confident in who they are. You can say that their main focus in life was following their dreams. They would never let their current situation hold them back, always kept moving towards their dreams, step by step. Their motto could have been "Don't worry, be happy," or something like "Being grateful is a choice." The main thing that made them stand out in the neighborhood was their popularity with all of the other neighbors. Being so loving, optimistic, and confident made them really nice people to spend time with, and their house was often the place where the other kids came after school. They didn't have much money, but that never held them back in any way. They just always focused on giving their kids a better life than they themselves had, since they had to start out with nothing themselves. They were strict parents, wanting their kids to be successful in all areas. Do good in school, be kind to other people, make sure you can provide for your own family someday. Give it your best, and you will be rewarded in the future. They made all of their decisions based on high family values. Family comes first, and we stick together. And they raised their children in their image with all of these beliefs of being compassionate toward others, always be kind, be authentic, never give up on your dreams, and no matter what, family comes first. All of these things combined made the Margolis family a really warm place for everyone to visit. A somewhat unorganized but loving family with lots of noise. So, did this warm but strict upbringing and believing in your dreams help to give their children a better future with maybe even more financial stability? And did their children become the warm, caring, and compassionate people that their parents hoped for? If you want to find out how each of these lives turned out up until the 4th generation, be sure to check the episode about the Margolis family. It'll be a bit further down in the playlist. In that episode, we are going to look at each of these Sims in the first 3 generations, all individually. And with that said, we have come to the end of this episode. The first episode in this series, and I'm hoping it's the first in a long line of new episodes. So, since filming and doing most of the voiceovers of this video, actually a few more months have passed. I actually started this project in April, and I'm doing the last of this voiceover in September. Probably a few days before I'm uploading. So yeah, life has been hectic and I haven't been able to spend that much time at all on playing, building or filming this neighborhood. And I'm a little rusty, as you can tell by this clip right here. So let's take a look at their family trees. Here we see the Dawson family tree. You can see that it all started with George. at least I can still make myself laugh. But we're trying to get back on track and back to the project that I actually started a few months ago. This neighborhood is just so near and dear to my heart. I will probably never stop playing this neighborhood, so I will never really abandon this project either. I hope this gave you a good look into what this series is going to be about. Keep following this playlist if you want to see the story-based episodes. And check out the separate renovations playlist if you're more interested in building and renovating a town. I can't wait to actually start using the historic video footage from these families in their episodes. So yeah, I really hope to see you in the next one. For now, I hope you have a good week. Thanks for watching this video. Leave a like if you haven't already and subscribe if you want to follow these stories and see how the later generations turned out. Bye!